complicated project, it's a bold project, and as a result there are a lot of things we have to determine, and this is the beginning of that process. But I'm pleased at the number of people this morning, my colleagues and some of the deputants, who recognize this for what it is, which is a citywide project that is looking to the future and saying 25 years from now, 10 years from now, what do we want to be able to say about the city in terms of what we did now in 2016, or began in 2016, to maintain the quality of life in the city and to make sure that some of the deficits that have accumulated over periods of time, whether it's in transit or public space or otherwise, that we began the process in an honest and forthright way and a business-like way to remedy that. And so the discussion this morning very much carried that tone with it, and we'll conclude it this afternoon and then go forward, of course, to the City Council, where there'll be a further discussion in a couple of weeks. But this is something that I believe is important to the city. I believe in it. I have pushed it forward with help from our city staff and Councillor Cressy, among others, and I'll continue to do so.
Are you concerned, Mayor, about the air rights? We keep hearing about the air rights and how much this is all going to cost. We know that the report estimated that the project could cost $1.05 billion. And hearing from at least the former TTC GM, Ducharme, was speaking to some folks on CTV earlier, saying that this could be the air rights alone purchasing that billions. So are we looking at this and really understanding just how much this could be? Like, is that a big concern for you?
Well, obviously, getting a handle on what it's going to cost us to build the park is an important step that's among those that we're looking at with this work that's going to be starting after approval by City Council. But the notion that the air rights are worth that kind of sum of money on their own doesn't seem very plausible if we proceed first to do the first thing that is recommended in today's report, which is to bring about an official plan amendment to create a kind of zoning for that particular area that really provides for a park and nothing else. I mean, those lands become valuable in that respect, or those air rights, only if the city agreed to allow something to be built there. And I think that was an important point that Ms. Keesmaat made this morning. You know, people can make various claims, and I know there's all kinds of letters floating around everywhere about people claiming to have an interest here. The value of that interest, let alone whether the interest is valid or not, but the value of it is actually something that is determined by the city, because we are the ones that either give or do not give a particular designation to a piece of land on which something can be built or not built. And it is my strong desire that we take the steps now to preserve the air rights, the potential piece of land over those railway corridors for a park. And so that would really negate much of what you talk about. But this is the work we're beginning now, and we'll take all the letters and put them in a file and have somebody look at them and decide all of this, and they'll come back with a report.
At the same time, Mayor, at the same time, your deputy city manager twice, three times maybe referenced the legal complications, which I'm assuming is what you're referring to. So there's bound to be more than a few debates about what you're saying right now.
Every time these kinds of developments have been proposed for, in this case, a park, in other cities and even here in Toronto that involve, for example, historic, land interests held by the railways, which it's more than one railway, and so on, it's not simple. And so that's why we're taking the time, and that's why specifically mentioned in the report, resources will be allocated to look at all the legal issues. But I'm very confident, as we've done before, that we can find a way around those and deal with those. We will find out what the real cost of this is going to be. We will look at some of the other technical challenges that exist in terms of engineering and so forth, and that's exactly the work we're going about now in a business-like way. But I would just say, overlaid on top of all of that is my own very strong desire as a city-building project for the future of this city and its health and its vibrancy and its livability to proceed ahead with this. But we're doing the work now to determine, what we have to do to make that possible. Sorry, I'll get around. Don't worry, there's lots of time here.
We've heard some characterizations of the discussions that have been held thus far with the rail lines, that these talks have been good and productive, and now we see the TTR letter today, which is calling park planning premature, inappropriate. Could you talk about that? What's your reaction?
I can only tell you that, first of all, there were discussions that took place before we made the announcement that were positive. And I think when you deal with the top echelon of the companies that make up Toronto Terminal Railways and you see what their comments will be on a go-forward basis, that they will be working with us, in collaboration with us, as they've done other times, and that we will find a resolution to this. And in the end, I repeat what I said a moment ago, the city is the one that decides what the official plan says with respect to the air rights over that piece of land. They have the right, obviously, to operate their transportation terminal along that ground, but we're the ones that make decisions about what happens with, with the status or the zoning attributable to those air rights and how the official plan treats those. And I'm looking forward to very positive constructive discussions with the railways about that, with them understanding very clearly my very firm desire to move ahead and construct a bold, visionary park on that site that will be a benefit to the entire city of Toronto and to generations to come of Torontonians.
Mayor Tory, when you look at the history of City Council on things like transit, the will and the foresight to build something that's going to be completed decades in the future hasn't been there in the past. Do you think this council has the political will and the foresight to build something that likely will be finished when many of this, probably all of these councils won't be around anymore on council?
I think the essence of strong leadership really arises out of things that you're going to do that are far-sighted and that will be completed after you're gone, but that you do them because you know that they're in the best interest of building a livable city and making decisions that will be necessary to start now in order to have them in place at a time when you're not here. So I'm confident. There's been a number of challenges here at City Hall over the time before I was here. One involved the fact that in many cases people wouldn't look at the city in its post-amalgamation form as one city, where things you do, whether they're in Scarborough or downtown, benefit the whole city. You don't hear a lot of discussion about the zoo being in Scarborough and somehow this is really bad for the rest of the city. It's a city asset, it's a city attraction, it happens to be in Scarborough and people from all over Toronto go there. You don't hear much talk about the island being in a particular geographic location, but people from all over the city come there. And I think you know, when I sought this office, I said that I was going to make every effort I could, both in terms of the way I conducted myself as the leader of the city, but also in terms of the projects that I brought forward and supported, that I was going to try and create a much greater sense of one city, that it's all for one and one for all. And I'm very hopeful as this debate unfolds, we'll see much less of this, kind of my backyard, your backyard thing, and have people focus instead on what's good for the whole city. And I think this park, that happens to be in the sort of center of the heart of the city, will be a valuable citywide asset and will provide some much needed benefits for the downtown as well.
Mr. Mayor, commercial drone use, and specifically, do you think it's going to become a popular technology? Is it something you're welcoming to the city?
I've now been to 3 events in the last couple of weeks where a drone sort of appeared in the air, and these weren't commercial. Well, there may have been commercial as in broadcasting outlets or whatever, but I think it certainly underlines the fact, as we see drones showing up in places and drones being used on a commercial basis by companies, that the need to take a look at it, which is all we're doing here, and see what some of the implications are, is prudent, just in the interests of public safety and in the interests of making sure we don't have chaos. So I support the fact that our officials are being asked to take a look at this and see what our role is vis-a-vis both the other governments and vis-a-vis the private sector in making sure we kind of maintain some semblance of safety and order in the skies above the city. David?
To switch to Toronto Hydro for a second.
Sure.
In your speech yesterday, you said no transformers being built since 1955. Your staff now say you actually meant no downtown transformer. You didn't mention that there is one being built near the CN Tower.
I think actually I did acknowledge that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I apologize. So, but there are people who know more about energy probably in this system than me or you saying today that linking some recent blackouts to the need to privatize Toronto Hydro is not a valid link, and they'll point out that when the Ontario Energy Board gave an increase for Toronto Hydro, part of that was for money to maintain and actually upgrade the grid. So is this just a communication strategy?
No, I tell you what, I mean, I'll invite you to go to the people who would know best what the needs are of our electric system in Toronto, which are the people who run Toronto Hydro, and they have documents, many of which are in the public domain, I'm sure, that indicate what their total capital requirements are going forward, just to have the system keep up. Just keep up to sort of, say, not even where we are today, to get ahead of that. I'm told that the plans that are in place now, including the new transformer station, the Copeland station, will have us, given the development that's also already been approved for the downtown core, running at 95% capacity in a few years. And you can't run these things at 95% capacity and not have a high percentage chance that you're going to have failures of one kind or another. And I'm just saying that what I want to do is make sure that we're able to carry out the plans of Toronto Hydro, and I think they'd be the first to tell you, but you go and ask them, that they have been constrained in recent years in terms of how up-to-date, how quickly they can make their plant by the lack of availability of capital. And they have deliberately said to us, long before any discussion was going on about trying to capture some of the value of hydro, that we had to take a look at the alternatives that I mentioned yesterday, and I'll repeat them. There are only three, and it's the same as basically any other business. Number one, you can ask the shareholder, who is us, to put in equity. So if we're being asked to put in hundreds of millions of dollars, where does that come from? It comes from the taxpayers, so we'd have to raise taxes to do that. Or number two, we could forego the dividend that we get of $60 million a year, and I think you all know that we put that dividend to use. It's not sitting around in a savings account. It's being used to help fund the transit system and help fund housing. And the third is some degree of financial restructuring of hydro that would allow us to capture some money to help them with their capital needs. But go and ask them about their capital needs. I heard Mr. Haynes on the radio myself the other day talking in the light of these very same blackouts, the ones downtown in particular, about the need for them to make substantial upgrades to their plant. That was him saying that, not me. And I'm just responding to what he said. And I just won't preside over a city, quite frankly, where we're running right into the red zone when we have high use of hydro by developments we've approved, and somehow to throw up my hands and say, well, it wasn't my job or the job of my colleagues on council as the shareholders of hydro to make sure they had the funds needed through Energy Board applications or otherwise, because you don't always get everything you want from the Energy Board, to make sure this plant is able to meet the needs of the city, the economic needs and the human needs of people who live here.
Just want to ask you about Airbnb,
Yep.
and whether you think there's a whole regulatory Uber-style battle brewing, with the sense that there's a small percentage of hosts listing multiple properties and, you know, maybe using it for commercial uses. What is the plan here? Is there something in the works?
I don't want to adopt your language about you know, confrontations to come. I will say this, and I've mentioned this to a number of other public office holders in recent times, and in fact was discussing it with Mayor Nenshi last night, who was here, and that is that this is becoming a matter about which I hear more on almost a kind of daily basis. And so it's one of those things where it's not like we're sitting around waiting for anything to develop in a bad way. We have a report coming forward this fall from our officials about the implications of the issue and what we might consider doing about it. I will tell you that the thing I'm hearing the most about, and that I've actually been out, as I've mentioned to you before, and had a look at one of the examples of somebody owning multiple properties on a residential street, is people buying up a series of houses within a residential neighborhood and then renting those houses out. And they told me most of it, the rental is for things like wedding parties and so on. And they're not bad people, and it's not sort of frat parties, but it's parties that involve a lot of people, and they're celebrating and they're having fun, but they're making a lot of noise within a neighborhood where they wouldn't necessarily have expected that to be happening sort of every night. And so I've actually been out to see it. I'm mindful of it, and now we're doing exactly what we should do, which is not have me declare any emergency at this stage, not have me tell you what I think we should do, but to rely on our officials to tell us what they think we should do. I'll mention one other issue just because I want you to hear sort of what I hear. I've also started to hear a little bit from the hotels, only a couple of times so far, but they've said that where there are hotels, for example, that are co-located with condos in the same building, that there will be 40 or 50 condos in the upper part of the building that end up in Airbnb and being rented out, and the hotels trying to stay in business below. And of course, the hotels paying commercial taxes, they're having a bunch of regulations that we and other governments impose on them. The people upstairs are not. And they're simply saying it's tough for us to carry on the hotel business. So these are the things we're here to try and deal with. We're ahead of this, at least to the extent that we have a report being prepared now, and it will be ready soon. And then I think we'll know what the sort of responsible thing is to do to try and make sure we have the appropriate hand on this issue. I'll take one more for yes, Jeff.
Hydro, can you
Yes.
tell us about any talks you've had with the province on loosening the restrictions, the changes you would need to actually sell off part of hydro?
You know me, I mean, I really do try to answer these questions as completely as I can. And the only discussion we've had on the subject was quite some considerable time ago when the City Council passed the request to have this looked looked into back in whenever that was in the early summer. We had, in one of my regular meetings with the Premier, we simply said that one of the realities was there's this tax provision there that has to do with any proposal that anybody came back with to sell a piece or to take it public that would have to be addressed. And so that's the only discussion. There have been no other discussions. What we're doing, and I'm being totally open with you on this, we are awaiting the report that is going to come back from people hired by the city staff to advise on what some of these options are for realizing value from Toronto Hydro and other assets as directed by the City Council, and we're awaiting that report.
But you haven't gotten an assurance from the Premier or anyone?
No, well, because there was nothing to get an assurance on. I mean, there was no proposal. I took them. There was no indication I said I had. They simply asked, in light of what City Council did, which was to actually approve looking into this and other assets, that a brief discussion came up about this tax provision, that it exists, and so that was it.
Thanks, guys.
Yep, thanks a lot. Have a great day.